I'm John Aaron, and I'm one of the inventors of the iControl, along with my friend Robert Gamble, who co-invented the iControl system with me. Let me give you a little bit of my background. I've been a model railroader for well over 30 years and have modeled in virtually every scale and gauge, and many of you are saying, oh, I recognize him, and you've probably seen my pictures in magazines or know me from one of the many organizations I'm active in, including the National Model Railroad Association and the LGB Club of America. And many more of you are probably familiar with my name because over the years I've written for just about virtually every one of the major model railroading magazines, and in fact do continue to do 3 or 4 articles a year. So I have a lot of experience in the model railroad hobby. Robert, why don't you give us some of your background?
I'm an electrical engineer by trade. I also do consulting work for people who need assistance in engineering design. I've had Model HO trains, and John came to me a while back wanting some equipment designed for his train layout. John, why don't you tell us what you came up with as far as needs for your trains?
Well, my Papillon Valley Garden Railroad, which many people are familiar with because it's been featured so much in the various magazines. In fact, it'll be featured this year for the 3rd time in Garden Railways magazine, and also in the Classic Toy Trains and in the LGB Telegram. And the point is, when a layout is getting that much press, it means you're looking at a fairly completed layout, and that's exactly where I was. I was beyond the point of worrying about my track plan or what buildings or what era I was going to model, and I really got to thinking about operation. And what I wanted to do was to be able to run several trains on one track, because I just have a single track main line, and I wanted to be able to have the trains stop at stations and leave again without my having to worry about it. And on some of the sidings, I wanted a situation where one train would be parked in the station, and as the other train came up, that one would leave. And of course there were various operating accessories, crossing gates, gate houses, and the crossbuck flashers that I wanted to be able to operate. And I went out into the marketplace looking at electronic products, and there were very many fine products out there. But there were 2 problems for me with all of the products. One, I was not able to find, and they may be out there, but I was not able to find one that was weatherproof. And with the Garden Railroad being out there in the snow and the rain and the heat of the summer, I needed something that could stand up to that. Any one of the products would have been fun on my indoor O-gauge layout. The other problem was all of the devices were dedicated. And what I mean was, if you wanted to, say, drop a crossing gate, you had to buy a device to do that. If you wanted to operate a crossbuck flasher, you needed a device to do it. If you wanted to stop a train at a station, you needed a device. You needed another device for signals. You needed another device to control your sound. And not only does that get expensive, and I probably would have went that way anyway if they had been weatherproofed, but the other problem is, you know, you change your mind. You know, you might have a siding and a whole setup, and then a year later you change your layout design because layouts are truly never finished. And then you're stuck with some electronics you bought to do a particular job that you're no longer doing, and they can't do anything else. So my idea was to have a device that could do everything, and that's what we have here in the iControl. This one device can control a multiple functions. It's really only limited by your imagination. And my other idea was to have it where it would actually see the trains, and that's what this eye does. This eye goes under the track, and it actually can see the train pass over it. And this way, like with my layout that was finished, I didn't want to rip up track and rewire and stuff like that to put this thing in. I needed something where I could just, you know, slip it under the rails on my outdoor layout, or on my indoor O-gauge, just simply drill a little hole, drop it between the rails, and the wire goes out under the board. And so I made up this wish list of what I wanted to be able to do. I didn't know if it was possible. and I knew I didn't have the wiring experience or this experience with computers that I knew would be very important in designing anything this complicated. So I made up this list, and I came to my friend Robert and said, Robert, can we do it? And why don't you tell him what you did from there?
I looked at the list, and I came up with an idea to use the eye as a sensor to see when the train was there. And then my unit controls the accessories. It's powered by AC or DC or even batteries. It is isolated from your track in that it doesn't require there to be anything there. You can just wave your hand over the control and it will actuate the equipment.
Well, this would be a real thing then for like now I happen to operate my garden railroad from track power, but I know a lot of guys and gals operate from remote control, you know, where they're carrying batteries on board, and live steam where the, you know, they're controlling a live steamer with remote control. So, in other words, you're saying that no power has to come out of the track at all then?
No, you don't need power from the track at all. It can run off the track power. There is a regulator built into the device, eliminating some of the problems that you had to buy separate power supplies for the controllers. But as far as it's concerned, it's completely isolated from your layout.
Well, I think one of the things that I was very impressed with the design that you came up with here, I hate wiring. I mean, I just hate it. I'm familiar with it, I do it, but basically, I just want to get my trains running. And this thing that you came up with here, what is this? It's a
multi-outlet strip. You just push the buttons, insert the wire, and it makes the contact. You don't have to worry about any screws being tightened down or if the wire slipping out of it. You just put it in the hole and close the switch there, and it's ready. They're all color-coded. You don't need to know, plus or minus. You tell you in the instructions, this is where it goes.
Yeah, I designed a lot of the wiring diagrams for this unit. The instructions are straightforward if you're already know what you want to operate, or if you're familiar with model railroading and have an idea of what you want to operate, you can get by with just the instructions that come packed with the control. But for people just getting into the hobby, or for people who just really want to kind of push it to the limit, we've designed a project book that it's just jam-packed with projects and things that you can do with these eye controls. This unit is capable of controlling up to 16 functions, and you can mix AC and DC and battery-operated accessories. You can do several trains on one track. It controls everything literally from the train to the signal to the switch machine, with some really good design work on Robert's part. It even does reversing loops and Ys automatically in the back and forth shuttles that you see the units do. What I want to talk about though, Robert, is even with all of this color coding in the project book, what happens if you hook this up wrong?
The unit's protected from hooking up to improper power. There's no problems. The unit won't operate when it's hooked up backwards, but it won't be damaged. You can just remove the wiring and put it in the correct way, and it will function normally.
And there's very little chance of anyone damaging an accessory or a locomotive or that.
That's correct.
Because you're just dead power when you don't have it hooked up properly.
That's correct.
Now this unit normally comes, you're probably wondering how this can be weatherproof. This normally comes in a black rubber coating. The unit is actually dipped down into that, and I had left this off to so that you could see what a unit looked like. Normally you're just going to see a big black gob and a little white switch and the control grid here. Basically, It's weatherproof, it's rugged, it comes with a 5-year warranty. Robert and I wanted to get back to our respective hobbies and our own train hobbies, so we turned this design over to a company called APS Technology, who is going to do a terrific job on marketing it and servicing customers who are interested in buying it. And we just think it's a terrific product. That may be a little egotistical since we invented it, but we do think it's a terrific product. I've been using them on my railroads now for the better part of a year. All kinds of weather conditions. We've never had a failure or any problem with it, but why take our word for it? Let's go on with this video here, and you can see exactly what the eye control can do for your railroad. But I just wanted to keep everything above the board just to show you how it wires up. This is the power pack over here, which of course is feeding power to the track for the trains through this gray wire. Then the accessory portion of the pack feeds the power here into the eye control, and from there it's distributed to the signals, to the switch machine, anywhere it needs to be distributed. Now, the situation that I've set up here, there are literally probably hundreds of different combinations you can use an eye control for controlling switch machines. I just set up one situation here to show you how it would work, and I go over quite a few of them in the instruction manual, and of course your own imagination here is really the limit. Here we have a main line that comes this way, and this line always has a green signal, and the switch machine is always switched in the direction of that line. Then we have a branch line coming in over here, where a switcher is going to come out of shortly, and that always has a red signal. Now what's going to happen is the eye control unit is mounted over here in the track. I know they're a little hard to see when they're mounted, and this is HO track, so it makes it a little bigger. But the eye control unit is right here, and what will happen is when the switcher passes that, it will change this signal here from green, giving this the red, and it will of course give itself the green. It'll come over here, change the switch machine, and then when the switcher gets a little bit down the line, it'll change everything back, giving this the clear green signal again, change the switch machine back, give this the red signal. These signals are a little hard to see on video. I took the lens covers off of them, and we're using G-scale signals here, even with HO, so that you can see what's happening. So you purists bear with us a little bit on the problem with the scale. Now, once again, just to explain what's going to happen, we're going to have the switcher come, change the main line to a red signal, change the turnout in the direction that it needs to be going, give the branch line now the green signal. Then once it clears the turnout, it will change the switch machine back, green signal over here again, red signal over there. Let me turn on the power pack now and we'll watch it go. I'm going to give you an instant replay on that again, just so you can see it. It goes a little quick. We're going to turn the power pack on, and away it goes. And that's an application of an eye control using a switch machine and some signals. Now, how complicated is this wiring really? Not very. It's all color-coded, and the thing to remember is you're putting in a wire at a time. Now, it looks like there's a big bird's nest of wires over here, but most of them actually have to do with the signals. If we take away now all the wiring that has to do with the signals here, which is a considerable mess, What happened there was because I passed my house, if you would back even a light little speeder hand car that over it, it would go. All right, now taking the wiring for the signals away, we really don't have much to deal with. We just have the two wires coming in for the eye control itself that's in the track. We have the two wires feeding the power, and of course we have the three wires that go down to your normal switch machine hookup. Looks a little scarier with all this Kazarai on here for the signals, but it really is a very, very simple hookup. It's all color coded. There's no soldering, there's no screws to put things around. These units really were designed for guys who hate wiring. Now we want to talk about how to install the eye control in various types of track. This is an eye control unit. This is the unit that actually can see what's going on when the train goes over. These are hermetically sealed, totally waterproof. When you get them, they have a black rubber substance here which waterproofs all the connections where we solder the wires on, and they have this gray wire which is again totally weatherproof. And we give you a little more wire than this. We give you 6 foot on each unit. I just clipped the wire off of this one so that it's a little easier to see what we're doing. Now, working with the various types of track is really very simple. In most cases, even if the layout is already built, you have no problem mounting the control. Let's start with the good old standby HO first. Now, if the HO track were down, you would have to take a couple of ties out with a razor knife. Since this track is loose, all I'm going to do is clip out 2 ties. And we'll clip them out from the other side here. And that's the end of those. And the control just sits between the ties like that. In fact, you can clip that one very well, did I? Very close. There we go. Control just goes right in there, and of course your wires go down under the board. And that's the mounting. It does not interfere at all with the wheels as it goes by. You drill a hole about 1/4 inch, and this goes under your board. And as I say, if your track's already mounted, just cut this out with a razor knife, drill a hole, and drop the control down that way. A little bit of any good adhesive substance, I use the instant road bed a lot, will hold that down. And that's how it's done in HO. This product was really marketed for the bigger scales, for G scale and O scale. So when you get down to something like N scale, you have a big differential. You can still use this in N scale, though, very easily. What you want to do again is simply take out just a couple of ties, and on N scale they'll come right off the rail this way. And then what you want to do is just set here you have to drill a hole in your board to accommodate the depth of the eye control, and the eye control actually sets under the track that way, and it'll work fine. It'll see the trains as they go over, and the coverage area is actually quite good since it takes up the whole width of the track in N gauge. Now, when we're talking about O and O27 track, it's very simple. You just drill a 1/4 inch hole for the wiring. You put them down through the board, and this literally just snaps right between the rails. You just catch the one end, snap, it's in. If you want to take it out again, snap, it's out. And it just holds itself right in place. You don't need any adhesive or anything. You can move it up and down the track. Now again, even if your layout is already mounted and this were mounted flush to the board, it's absolutely no problem to drill a hole and snap that right in there. No problem at all. G scale, there's plenty of room obviously between the ties to put these in, so no problem at all. But if your G scale track is already mounted, such as this one is, all you do is simply bend it right there, which you can do, put it sideways, and slip it in right under the track at that point. Now I have to raise the track just a little bit to do that, and there it is in place. This is also a great way on temporary layouts where you just put the layout, say, up on the floor around Christmas time to mount the control. Doesn't really matter, you can mount it to one side of the rail, the other outside. You've seen on my outdoor layout, we just ballast right in around the control. It's a very, very simple mounting process, no matter what gauge. I didn't show a piece of American Flyer track because American Flyer obviously is about this size with only 2 rails, and if you don't have enough space to mount it in there, well, then you should find a different hobby. Let's take a look at what AutoControl can do with some operating accessories. Here we have a Tyco concrete culvert unloader, and it has a little forklift type of affair, pusher, and the idea is when the car is positioned over here in place, it will push the concrete culverts off onto the unloading ramp. Now, this type of accessory would normally be controlled with a push button, but the problem is you would have to hold down the push button and try and use your power pack at the same time, and it becomes very clumsy and very awkward to get the type of smooth operation that you're looking for. Let's start the switcher down and see how much smoother it is operating with an AutoControl. How is it working? Very simply, let me put my hand in. If the control becomes covered, the unit will work. There it goes right over my finger. If the control is not covered, the unit won't work. And of course, this is on an end of a siding dedicated to unloading this particular car. Let's bring the switcher down and see what happens. And there it made its getaway, so to speak, and the concrete is unloaded. How is this wired up? Very simply, we have an AutoControl right over here, and of course this would normally be under the board, or in a bigger scale, like if this were O-scale or something, could actually be mounted in the building. This same principle can be used on any of the Lionel or American Flyer accessories, any of these types of accessories that are out in G-scale. It really doesn't matter. Okay, we've got the sensor in the track right here. We have the wire from the sensor going over here to the AutoControl unit. We have, of course, the black wires bring the power in from the power pack. And in this case, this clear wire, which is very hard to see, is the one that comes with the accessory. And that simply used to be connected to the power pack. It's now connected to the AutoControl. And let me stop a minute, we'll load up the car and I'll show you once more how that works. The reason I had to pause on the problem with Tyco's engineers that they can work on is they have not yet figured out how to get this thing to reload the car, so that has to be done by hand. Let's take the switcher down again and watch it operate. I have a little fun with this now and add a signal in here. What the signal will do, we're using G-scale actually so that you can see it well. On the video, HO would be a little too small. It has a green light for the train to come down the track when the car is properly positioned over the sensor at the unloading platform. It'll give a red light to let the engineer know to stop the train. And then when it's done unloading, it'll give a green light as it backs out, letting it know that it's all right to leave, that the car is fully unloaded. This was just hooked up to the same circuit we had. You just push the little tabs down, no soldering or any type of connection like that, and just push the wires in. And the beauty in this unit is it is multitasking. In other words, we could have added a signal over here on this side of the track. We could have put a electronic or an electric diesel horn under the board so that it blew when it got to the place where it had to unload. And the unit here can handle the wattage of even the largest Lionel and the new right-of-way and Dolly electronic transformers. So basically the number of tasks that you can do, the number of things that you can control with an eye control is simply limited by the wattage of your power pack. Now let's bring the switcher down and have a little fun, watch this unload. What we'd like to show you now is some of the automated things that the eye control can do. Here, because we're in a very limited room here in our office to set things up, we've set up a loop of Lionel track because it can make a very tight loop. Now, this doesn't matter what kind of track you use. It can be 2-rail track, 3-rail track, G scale, HO, N scale. Makes no difference. It wires up exactly the same. We're just using the Lionel for convenience. Now let's do a very simple stop. Supposing we want the train to stop right here to pick up orders here at the gatehouse, yard office, whatever you'd want it to represent. What we will do is simply place an eye control in the track right over here. When the train passes the eye control, it will turn off this section of track, which is insulated with the fiber pins, so that this track is actually receiving its power independently from the outside loop. Now, we can set the eye control to stop the train anywhere from 1 second to 2 minutes. I've got this set for about a 10-second stop, so let's turn on the power and wait for it to come around. Ten seconds is a long time when you're just waiting and staring at this. And forgive me for using this gigantic Trainmaster. It happened to be an engine that I had around. I didn't put any cars on it. It makes a train in itself, really, with the size of it. And this will do this reliably. You could run this all day, all night, and into the next day. Probably the only thing that would ever stop this circuit is when the motor and the Trainmaster burn out. Now, if you want to add a little animation here, just for the fun of it, I can also get the little gatehouse to work right off the same eye control that's controlling the Trainmaster here. So let's take a pause for just a second, and I'll hook that up for you. What I've done, I've hooked this up so that he comes out just a couple of seconds before the train actually gets there, so that it looks like he's the one that's stopping the train. I think this is one of the noisier accessors that Lionel makes. But a lot of fun to watch. We'll move on to something else in a minute. I don't know how long you want to watch this happen. Now, we could also make the same eye control run signals, a crossing bell, a crossing gate could go down at the same time this is stopping. Infinite number of things that it can do because it is multitasking. When my partner and I started working on the eye control, we surveyed a lot of model railroaders and said, if you could do anything you wanted electronically, what would you do? And this was one of their number one things that almost everyone told us: have one train pull into the station and the other train leave. And this is exactly what we're doing here. The train master comes in, and when the steam locomotive arrives, the train master leaves. When the train master comes back, the steam locomotive leaves. And this can go on perpetually for, days. And they both stop exactly where they're supposed to, just at the start of the crossing shanty there. And this is very, very simple to wire up, all being controlled again by one eye control. And I don't know how long we want to watch this. Of course, we have a very small loop here, so it doesn't take the trains long to get around, but you could literally do this with just about any size loop. Kind of a lot of fun to watch. Operates flawlessly every time. Now let's take a look and see how the wiring is done on this particular setup. The wiring is incredibly simple. We're starting with that same loop that we had for the station stop. The eye control is in the same place. This is the sensor that sees the train. I've kept all the wiring above board, so to speak, so that you can see it. And here's the wire that goes all the way over under the other track and over to where we have our main eye control unit. There's the power pack that powers everything. Let me get over there now and explain to you how everything works. Right, this is the power pack over here, which feeds through this wire all the power to the eye control system. Once the power is here, the eye control system then decides how to distribute that. Let's try and take a little closer look at that. All right, here's what we have happening. The wire from the power pack goes to the eye control. And then from that same circuit coming back off of here and under the board and around the outside, we have a wire that's visible way over here that feeds the inside loop. We also have a wire off of the same circuit over here that feeds the outside loop. Now, both loops are insulated. The outside loop from here to here, the inside loop from here to here. Now, the red wire that goes to the control feeds the insulated section of the inside loop. And the gray wire that goes to the control feeds the insulated section of the outside loop. And as I say, it matters not whether you're using 2-rail or 3-rail track. You can do the same thing in anything from N gauge to G gauge. Now, what happens when the train passes over the sensor way back over there? It changes the power from one track to the other track. As the train comes in, this track does not have power, so the steam locomotive would be sitting here. When the sensor sees the other train coming, it releases this locomotive by providing power to this section of track and turning off the power to this section, and the steam locomotive leaves. Then when the train comes back around, the opposite situation occurs. And it's an extremely reliable system, as you saw it operate before. Very, very simple wiring. Now, let's suppose on top of what we have here, we want to now make the crossing gate operate. All right, what we're going to do is simply wire that into the same circuit, and I'm going to add those wires here so you can see what goes on. I didn't want to have everything on all at once and just have a big rat's nest of wiring that you couldn't see. Of course, all these wires would normally be under the board. This cable coming up controls the wiring now for the gatehouse. And the red wire that comes out of the cable is to keep the light on, and the yellow and green wire control the trigger when the little man comes in and out. Now again, that was just added in on top of the wiring that we already had, so that it looks complicated now, but again, we had a simple wiring, just added more simple wiring, and because all these are push button connectors, there's no soldering, there's no screws to tighten. No problems at all. Let's have a look now at how it operates with the gatehouse. Again, we have totally reliable operation of the accessory. And you can see all the wiring there in the picture that controls it. And this could go on and on all day. But let's add more things to the same eye control. Let's say now we want the engine, when it is sitting, let me wait till it comes around, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Let's say we want the black engine here, the steam engine, to keep its bell ringing when it's parked on that siding. We can wire that in very, very simply. Let me show you how to do that. And now we've added to the wiring 2 more wires, just stuck them in, and they're operating an electronic bell that's put out by Ott Machine Works for Lionel. And the engine now will continue to ring its bell as long as it's parked on that siding. All again being controlled by the one eye control. Absolutely no problem with the number of accessories that you may want to control. Now, just for the fun of it, let's also have the engine blow its whistle before it leaves. Let me hook that up. The electronic whistle, also by Ott Machine Works for Lionel, is also controlled off of the same eye control just by adding the wires. And as you can see, the wiring is still fairly simplified. Don't worry about how to hook all this up because it shows you everything in the instruction manual. Now let's change the camera to a more realistic viewpoint and see what this whole thing looks like. With the eye eye control running the trains in opposite directions. You can reverse the direction of both trains, or as we're doing in this demonstration, you have one train going in one direction, one train going in the other direction. That's all done at your power pack, just like you normally would reverse it, whether you're using 2 or 3 rail trains, anything from N scale right up to G scale, line L, American Flyer, however you normally reverse, that's the way you reverse. This little N scale layout is just starting the layout, but already they've had the good sense to purchase an eye control unit, and the eye is in the outside track over in the vicinity of where you see the little church, and the other eye is in the track where you see the little freight house at the back of the layout. The one eye will control the trains stopping at the station, and the other eye will control the whistle. Now, as the trains go around, they're programmed to stop just as they are, with the freight train just a little ahead of the station and the passenger train with its coaches abreast of the station. So let's turn on the power and see what it does. Lines Outdoor Garden Railway, and I've just spent about 5 minutes hooking up one of the eye controls. Now, they're very hard to see, but down here on the track in the ballast, as you can see the pencil laying there in the track, the point of the pencil is actually pointing at the electric eye that senses when the trains come by. Now I'm going to remove the pencil so we can run the trains. Here we have a situation of a main line, which we're looking at, crossing a branch line using a crossing. Now what we're going to ask the control to do is to give the main line a constant green signal, and we're going to ask it to give the branch line a constant amber signal for caution. And then what we're going to ask it to do is when the train comes by, we want it to give a red signal both from the direction the train is coming and from the branch line. So the whole intersection will be red while the train is actually passing once the engineer's seen the green signal. And also the whistle will blow from the time the engineer passes the signal till the time the end of the train passes the crossing shanty that we're looking at. Now this is all controlled by the one device, and actually we're only using half the capacity. We could have controlled several more signals, a whistle, a horn. So let's get this thing in action. Photography is not my thing, trains are, but here comes the train. Signal changes, whistle blows. See the signal has changed to red on the other side also, and it cleared the crossing. Let's wait for it to come around and look at that one more time. I'll try and follow it for you this time. Here she comes. Gets the red signal on each side of the crossing, whistle blows until it... We'll go for this one more time just to make sure we got it. There we go. Signals changed, clears the shanty, and that's all from that one little eye that we looked at. We'll give you one overhead shot here. And she comes around the bend. Hits the eye, changes the signal, changes the other signal, follows right up until the last car passes. Try and give you one more shot here and keep both signals in the picture at once of that protected crossing. These devices are so reliable. I've had another device out here for several months, rain, wet, everything, and the weather doesn't bother them at all. And another bonus of this system is that it's totally reliable. I've run the train all day long, and it never misses. Every time it hits that crossing, it goes off. Every single time. As a matter of fact, if I were to just pass my hand over the crossing and it saw it, it would put it off. It's a totally reliable system. There's absolutely no problem with the eye control besides controlling the trains, controlling signals. Here we have the train set up again to do a station stop, and the signal, of course, gives it the green to go and the red to stop. There are many, many fine signals on the market depending on which scale you're in, and all of them will work with the eye control. We've tested almost every one of them. The signal that you're looking at is one that we manufacture, and it's used in scales from S scale, which would be your American flyer size, up to a little larger than G scale. The reason it can be used in those scales, it's universally adjustable in height. It does not follow a particular prototype. It's just a general, generic model. We looked at a lot of railroad signals from a lot of railroads, and this kind of looks like most of them that use the two-light system. Now, there are some unique things about this signal. One is that the lights are actually giant LEDs. These will never burn out, probably in your lifetime. And these are very handy signals both for outdoor use where waterproofing is needed and on large layouts where you have a signal back in an inaccessible area. They're also, to our knowledge, the lowest priced signal on the market in their scale. They're built on a brass core with a plastic shaft around them so that if they're outside in the hot sun and that, they won't melt. It makes them very strong, and the plastic sleeve makes it easy for you to modify the signal. If you want to add a little platform for, where they would normally change the bulbs, ladders, signal number plates, anything like that, all you have to do is scratch off a little of the paint and glue them on. The signals come in a variety of colors. I'm going to be showing you a silver one in a minute. And we also have, this one modifies to match the old tin-type Lionel signals. We have the black ones that you see on our outdoor layout. The signal is actually about 15 inches long. And the way the signal is installed is you drill a 3/8 inch hole in the board. I've pre-drilled this one so we didn't have sawdust hitting the camera. The wires are all color-coded. Red is for the red, green is for the green, and the other two are neutral for the particular bulbs in question. Let me show you how to install this particular signal. It's very, very easy. Let me get around here. All you do is, as I say, we drilled a 3/8 inch hole in the board already. Then you take the wire, you put it down through the hole. It's a single cable, which makes it very, very easy to deal with. We give you 6 feet of wire on each signal so that you have plenty of room. And then all you're going to do is put the signal in the hole. It's a snug fit, and adjust your height. Now, let's look at these heights. This signal's adjusted at 5 inches, which I feel is sort of prototypical. Now, Lionel, the old tin signals that you would buy from Lionel, happen to be at 8 inches. So let's put this one at an 8-inch height, just to have that comparison. So we'll just pull it up about an inch. More about 2 inches. Now that would be about the height of the old Lionel signals that you would buy. So if you've got some of them on your layout, you can very simply put some of the antique and collectible ones up front and do the rest of the layout with these. Now, as you notice, the LEDs are quite bright. We have a skylight here in the office, and so we have almost bright direct sunlight right now. And as you can see, they're very bright. They're extremely bright in the dark. You absolutely can't miss them. Now, the other thing about the old Lionel signals was they had a green base. Then they went to the silver and then to the black. And again, just to give the illusion of that color, that type of signal configuration, you can leave the signal all silver if you're doing a more modern railroad. But if you have some of the antique signals already, we have these snap-on units that simply snap on the signal right here. And that gives the appearance of the old green base that the Lionel had. Now let me go to work and hook up this signal so that we can use this to operate the other train. And we'll leave it up at the full height for that. This signal is for the diesel, and this one is for the steam locomotive. And each signal is now telling each train when it can go and when it can stop. And again, it's all being operated off of the same eye control that operated everything else. With these signals being adjustable, if you needed a dwarf signal, you would simply adjust this signal height all the way down to the ground, and you would have a dwarf signal. We said we tried to make an inexpensive, weatherproof, universal type signal. And it comes in all types of colors. We offer about 6 colors in the catalog, color combinations. But if you were buying signals for your railroad and you were buying 6 or more signals and you wanted a particular color scheme, no problem, we can make it up for you. This system, again, will work with 2-rail, 3-rail, whatever type of train you're using. Of course, in HO or N scale, you would have to use signals to that scale. As S scale is the smallest scale, these signals would really be suitable at that height there. Now, let me hook back up our little Gateman, our bell, our whistle. We got the signals in, and this, again, is only a fraction of the things that a single eye control can control, but it's all I happen to have here. And we'll kind of give you a little bit of a grand finale. Set up so that the locomotive will start ringing its bell before it pulls in, leaves the station, blows the whistle twice as it leaves. The little man comes out of the crossing house. Signals are changing. The locomotive keeps its bell ringing from the time it approaches the station until it leaves. Again, this is all being controlled from one eye control unit. Now, just how waterproof these signals are. I want to point out that we have one of the old Lionel type track contactors hooked up over here. These type of contactors are also used in other scales such as S and G, and they work very simply. They're very primitive. When the weight of the train hits the track, it turns the signal on and off. And I'm going to let that operate so that you can see that you don't really have to buy an eye control unit if you want to buy signals, although you won't be able to do all the additional operation. And number two, we need a way to turn the signal on and off when it's in the water. So let's start the train. Now here's our signal. As you can see, it's green. When the train hits the contactor, it will turn to red. And it just keeps doing that every time the train goes around. Now let's do our waterproofing demonstration. I'm going to insert the signal into the pitcher of water. And there you go. This is mostly demonstrating this for you outdoor LGB fans. I don't know how many times long we want to run this, but as you can see, the signal is absolutely, completely waterproof, just as reliable underwater. In fact, I've had these signals on my outdoor layout for the better part of a year now, through the worst weather, rain, snow, heat, and they always are. Model railroading is the incompatibility of various accessories, and also the unreliability of the old track contactors. The way the contactors work, for those who are unfamiliar with them, they are spring-loaded. This is a G-scale contactor here. It's a little bigger, and there's a spring right here. And what happens, it closes a circuit when the train goes over. If I would push this down, see the crossing lights up. Now here we have a Lionel contactor installed under the track. And when the weight of the train comes, it makes the Gateman come out. Now, as you see, because of the unreliability factor, I had to hit it again to make them go in. Other problems you have with contactors are, first of all, aesthetically, they look kind of ugly sticking out of the track. Number two is the track has to stay elevated in the area where the contactor is, which makes it real hard if you want to ballast your track, or if you want to put wooden ties in, which some people do in O gauge. Contactors are made in almost every gauge except for the real small ones like N and possibly HO. A third problem is they can only work usually with the weight of the locomotive. It takes so much spring pressure to keep pressure off the contact that when you have a light car, like a flat car or some of the later Lionel, or in this case a Marx caboose, it won't trip the contactor at all, because it takes quite a bit of weight. Now the other problem is incompatibility. In other words, here's a situation: I had wanted to hook up this signal, this crossing gate, and this crossbuck using the Lionel contactor. It cannot be done for the simple reason that the wiring configuration to operate the signal, that is to keep the signal red and then green when the train comes, would have to be hooked up here differently than the wiring configuration for the gatehouse, and therefore the power from the transformer would be routed the wrong way. So that put the signal out of the question. The problem with this accessory is it is battery operated. It has its own internal batteries, and works when the contactor goes down. And the problem here is that if these contacts would pick up the power from the power pack, these two bulbs, which are only 1.5 volt, would simply blow up. So unfortunately, you have to use a separate contactor for almost every accessory. The problem with that is it's hard enough for the train to push down one contactor. If I put 3 of them along this track, it would simply be impossible. Now let's watch a demonstration of the train actually in motion over the contactor so I can point out a few things. First of all, let me introduce our demonstration train, because I know this will bug some of you collectors who may be watching the video. This is a Marx electric locomotive from late 40s, early 50s. It's number 994, affectionately known to Marx collectors as the Plain Jane. And since I collect Marx trains, I thought it might be fun to run some of them on this demonstration. Like most of the old trains, it has a sequencer, so it has to back up before it goes forward and all that good stuff. Now see, when the engine hits the contactor, the little man comes out because the engine is heavy enough. But as soon as the cars start to come over, he's back in again. And of course, basically, the show's over once the engine passes this point. So there's no way to, say, have this man come out of the house before the engine ever gets to the area and stay out maybe for 3, 4, 5 seconds after the train passes. Now with eye control, it is possible to do that. It's also possible to tie all these accessories together, whether it's battery operated, whether it's electrically operated, AC, DC, it doesn't make any difference. The eye control unit, because of its sophisticated electronics, can make it all compatible. And there are other electronic units on the market that can take the place of a contactor, but many of them, again, can only do 1 or 2 accessories. Few of them can take a whole group of accessories and make them compatible like the eye control does. And since they cost about the same as the eye control, why settle for anything less? Now I'm going to stop this train, hook up an eye control in the same situation, and show you what we can do. Now we're all set up with the eye control, and we have the crossing crossbucks and the Gateman and the signal. Now I like to keep my signals on red, so what will happen is this signal will always stay red until it's safe for the train to approach. Then it'll stay green until after the train is out of the way, and then go back to red again. Now I have the eye control set up so that all of this will come on when the train is about 24 inches up the track, and will continue until it's about 24 inches down the track from the main section here. I couldn't resist when I went over to my workbench to get the eye control. I had one of the bell units sitting over there for the crossing, so I hooked that up, which we would not have been able to hook up before anyway with the contactor, so we'll have a little extra noise in here. And I do want to apologize for this crossing gate. These lights do blink, but it takes them quite a long time to start blinking. And the situation here is in the office we have such a small loop of track that they really will not be staying on long enough in this demonstration. So you will see them light up as the train goes by, and if we had a longer track, you would see them blink, but that's nothing to do with the eye control. It's just how that particular device is manufactured. So let me the animation out of an eye control, and I don't think that there's a product on the market, to my knowledge, that is electronically sophisticated as our eye control unit. Now, just to show you what this can do, supposing the train wasn't coming from that direction, supposing it came from this direction, or supposing it backed into the station. Let me show you a demonstration of that, and you will see that because the eye control can actually see the train, it will set everything in motion even if it's coming backwards, backing back up into the station. Let me get the sequence on the engine and the train running in the right direction here, and we'll show you how that works. Here we have another station stop on my outdoor Papillon Valley Garden Railway utilizing an eye control. We have an eye control mounted in the track right here. And what it will do, it will stop the passenger coaches at the little station here every time it comes around the loop. Now, we have that hooked up to this semaphore. This semaphore can be adjusted manually. If the semaphore is down, the train will stop. If the semaphore is up, it will go right through the station every time, so you have a choice. And what happens is there's a little metal rod that goes down underneath the semaphore and trips a switch, which operates the eye control, which is in the silver box over here. Let's let it run through a couple of times, and then we'll stop it a couple of times so you can see how it works. Now we're running through because the semaphore is up. Now we also could have used the eye control to operate the semaphore automatically if we wanted to use it as a block signal, but I prefer to use it this way. Ran through again because the semaphore is up. Now let's crank it down. Now that will activate the eye control. It makes a stop of, I guess we've got that set for about 5 or 10 seconds. Stops again because the semaphore is down. I'll show you one more time here as it comes around. And I also want to show you something else that same eye control is controlling, but we'll have to do that from a different angle. And now let's move the camera over and I'll show you a little different angle on what's happening. What was also happening is the eye control is also controlling this signal to a branch track, and as long as a train sits in the station across the crossing, the signal will stay red. When the train moves out after it gets up the track a little ways, it turns green, and then it'll change every time the train goes by. Now when this is red, power to this track is totally disconnected, so if somebody would turn the block on to this engine, it would not move. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the signal up so that the train goes right through the station and we can watch the action here. See, once it gets up the track a ways, then it'll turn to green. stays green. As soon as the train hits the station, it goes to red. It stays red till it gets a distance up the track. Now this track would be live now, and we could move this engine. In fact, let me show you that. But the engine cannot be moved. Another one of the signals we manufacture in the black. And the controls for the eye control are kept in the silver box right over here because there's no buildings or that nearby to put them in. Now, because the eye control reads light disturbance rather than the brightness of light, it's possible to put sensors inside the tunnel. And what we have here, we do not want to have an accident in this tunnel. So when the train moves, the signal stays green. And if the train should stop moving, the signal will go back to red. The train must continue to move through that tunnel to keep the signal green. I'll show you how that works again. Now that little bit of buzz that you hear, we're also using a relay for block control that's in that same box. You don't have to do that if you're not doing two train on one track operation. Here comes the train. Once it enters the tunnel, if it stops, we get a red light. It has to keep moving. Railroads like to operate two trains on one track, and on the Papillon Valley Garden Railroad, we're no exception. The signal also is controlling through the eye control a relay, which is in the box, that disconnects power to the track when the signal is red. So let's bring a train up, and just for the fun of it, let's leave this passenger car hanging out of the tunnel so that we have a accident waiting to happen. There we go. Now when the signal is red, power is disconnected to this track section. Now let me go get a freight train moving, and we'll bring it in at full speed and see if we can hit the end of that train. Here we go with the freight train, full speed ahead, heading towards the other train. And the eye control stopped at Gateman's tracks. Like on an instant replay, here comes the freight train barreling towards the train that stopped. And once again, the eye control stops at Gateman's tracks. What we have is a delayed timer. You can set it from 1 second to 2 minutes. We have this one set at about 30 seconds. And what's going to happen is it will now allow the other train to move forward and leave the area, and the other train to now go in and occupy the block. You have totally reliable two trains on one track control when you're using the eye control. You can make your blocks as long as short as you want. I make them about 6 feet long on my garden railway. I'll show you now is a little module that we manufacture to go with the eye control. This is called a reverse master. What this is used for is whenever you want to do like a reversing loop or a Y, or just have a train run back and forth on the track. What happens is every time the eye over here in the track activates the eye control will activate the reverse master, and what it will do is change the polarity every time. In other words, one time it'll be plus and minus, next time it'll be minus and plus. Now, normally on a reversing loop, I didn't have room to set one up here, but when the train would pass over the eye, as it left this area, it would change the polarity in the loops so that it matched. So you can have completely automatic operation. You never have to worry about changing any switches. Of course, because it's hooked up with an eye control, it also could change the switch machine. It also could run a signal. It also could blow the whistle when it got there, whatever you wanted it to do. Now, the two units hooked together, you cannot use the reverse master without an eye control to hook it up. So you must, if you're ordering, you must order both units in order to be able to do reversing loops Ys, or just have the train go back and forth on one track. One thing the product does not do by design is a lot of times when a train is running back and forth on one track, it stops at the end for a length of time and then goes back. Ours does not do that because we felt our primary purpose was to control reversing loops and Ys where of course you wouldn't want the train to stop. Actually, although the reverse master and eye control are capable together of doing this train back and forth on one track, it would be probably not much less expensive, but probably a few dollars less if you just got, for instance, LGB's unit, if all you want to do is display a train on one track. The two units are all color-coded, the eye control here and the reverse master. They hook together very simply. I just have the track hooked up here with some track clips. There's an eye here at this end, and there's another eye way back here at the other end. You'll see as the train moves back and forth to tell it when the train has to be reversed. And these eyes normally set down in the ties and are not noticeable. I left them sticking up so that you could see what we're doing here. Let's turn the power on now and watch it go. I see when it hits the one eye, it backs the unit up. I have this unit running very slow. Hits the other eye and backs it up. And of course the speed of the train is controlled by your power pack. There's no preset speed in the either the eye control or the reverse master unit. So if you want the train to go much faster, you certainly could. In fact, let me go over to the power pack and adjust the speed a little bit, just to give you an idea. There we go, we've speeded it up now a little bit at the pack. And we could slow it down at the pack. This unit is called our yard detective, and of course, like all of our units, this would be mounted under the border in a building if you were outside. What this does, it detects the presence of current in the track and changes a signal to indicate. Now, where would you use this? Well, did you ever have your train heading into a siding in a yard or even into the next block and you can't remember whether you turn the power on or not to that block? What will happen is the signal will indicate. Right now we're getting a red signal, which means there's no power in this track. Now, if I turn the power pack on even slightly, let me get around here where I can get to the control. You see, as soon as it gets any power, the signals turn green. Now, I've got this hooked up with both one of our super signals that we manufacture and a competitor's signal, just to show you don't have to use our signal. Now, as I would decrease the power, it will stay green just till it gets to the last little point where the pack is almost off, and then it goes back to red. Again, as I increase power, the first little bit of power it gets, the signals are green. And as I decrease, as soon as it gets to the very end where it's hardly getting probably a volt, the signals go back to red. Now, that's very handy to be able to know whether you've got any power on a track or not. Now let's put a train on the track though, just for the heck of it. I just want to show you something here. Stretch a little bit over this board to do that. With a train on the track, what I want you to see is that as I bring the power up, long before there's enough power for that engine to move, the signal will have changed, because the signal changes at the slightest power. And you see I'm going up quite a bit yet on the pack before the engine moves. As soon as I stop, now see again, the engine had stopped long before there was no power in the track, because it takes a lot more voltage to run the motor on the engine than it does just to indicate voltage on the track. This will pick up somewhere between half a volt and a volt going toward the track. Let me reverse the direction of the engine and we'll watch that again. As soon as any power is put in, the signal changes, but of course the engine does not move. And as soon as I start to decrease the power, the engine stops. And that's a handy little item that we sell. It's inexpensive. I use a number of them. In fact, I have them on every one of my sidings and side tracks. And as I say, it'll work with any signal, ours or any of our competitors, any scale. It's designed for every scale, literally from N scale all the way up to G. It can even be used in AC trains like American Flyer and Lionel, because it is capable of detecting AC as well as DC voltage. And like all our products, it's completely water resistant if you're using it outside. This is one of our super signals, and this is a Model 2. The Model 1 is conventional. It just has two lights that come on and off and it operates just like any signal. This Model 2 is designed strictly for track detection. Now, basically, you had seen elsewhere on the tape our yard detective, which can detect current in the track and the direction the train will move and everything. This is basically a poor man's version of that. You don't need any special electronics. All you need is the signal. The power pack hooks up to the track. The black wires go up and under the board and hook up to the signal. And what happens is, if there is no current in the track like there is now, the signal is not lit. Now, if we want to know which way the engine is going to move, we increase the power just a little bit, and the green signal comes on. Now, it's not enough to move the engine, but we know that the engine will move forward when it does move. And of course, as soon as power is stopped, the signal goes out. Now, the same thing happens if I reverse the power pack, and I'm in the reverse position. If I feed just a little bit of power, the red signal is on, indicating that the train will move in reverse. And again, when the power is cut, there's no power to the signal. These are very handy to use like on little branch lines or yard tracks that you don't use very often. As I say, it's just basically a very inexpensive method of track detection. Basically, no power, nothing is lit. If the engine is going to move forward, the green is lit. If it's going to move backward, the red is lit. And I find them very handy to use on my own outdoor garden railway, and you probably will too. Yes, I wanted to go into another question you're asking yourself is just how hard is it to hook up an eye control unit? And the answer is it's very, very simple. The first thing you need is a power source here. We're using a standard power pack. Now, the eye control does not have to power directly from the pack. You can power it anywhere where you have AC or DC on your railroad, depending on what you're running. The eye control handles both AC and DC power, but for instance, if you need an eye control, say way out on one of your back curves and you've already got something hooked up there that stays on all the time, just hook it up to that. It does need a source that stays on all the time though. Some guys with their railroads just like to get a little power pack like this and use it to power all their eye controls, and you pick these up for about $3 at train meets. So whatever's easier for you. Now, the first thing you're going to do is make the connection to the power pack. That's real simple. It's just, we're using the AC terminals here. Black goes to the black, red goes to the red, just like you would normally do it. And now the unit is powered. Now let me explain some of the parts of the control. This is the grid for hooking things up, and it's all push button, so that you don't have to do any screws or solder or anything like that. Every eye control has a very important function here, a fuse. Should you hook up anything wrong, hook it up even to your AC line, the 115 volt that's in the wall, the fuse will simply blow out and it protects the unit. Now you also have on an eye control a timer to govern how long you want things to be on and how you want to react, and a sensitivity control which adjusts it for the light. Now let's talk about that control first. Sensitivity simply means how sensitive you want the unit, because the eye control does not read the brightness of light, it reads light disturbance. So if you're putting one of these in almost in the dark, you want the sensitivity to be very high, where if you were out in bright sunlight, you'd want it to be very low, and it is self-adjusting within a range. So basically, you adjust this once when you install it wherever the eye itself is going to be, and you forget about it. The timer, of course, you'll adjust for the accessory. Then there's a switch right here that determines the type of power. Now there's two types of accessories on the market. There's ones that are basically a push button that have their own power, in which case you do not want to induce power into the system and you're using the red position for no power, or you have accessories that need power to feed them, like for instance a crossing gate that would drop needs power to the solenoid, in which case the switch goes in the green position. And don't worry, you can hook up any number of accessories, powered and unpowered, to the same eye control. It explains how to do that in the instruction manual. Now let's hook up the eye itself. This is the way your eye comes, and you get two of them, because sometimes you'll want to have a train running in both directions and you'll want it to activate in either direction. And it looks just like this. It has a black rubber coating that keeps it waterproof. This part is hermetically sealed. And the nice thing about these is you can put it in even if your layout is already built. All you have to do is, it comes with 6 feet of cord, so we're going to get rid of some of that. All you have to do is slip it between the track. If the track's already nailed down, just pull it up a little bit and it'll go right in place, and we have it right in place right there. Now how do we hook it up at this end? Okay, let's get the end of the wire here. There's two little white connectors. There is no polarity with the eye, so it doesn't matter. So we put one in one white connector, push the button. Whoop, we should have our wire tightened together, spot on the end. We put the other in there, and the control is working now. What happens is whenever this is covered, it will work. Whenever it's uncovered, it doesn't work. Now let's hook up this little cross buck over here. I'll show you how easy it is. Now this particular accessory has its own built-in batteries, so if you touch the two ends to it, it activates. Now what would happen is you wouldn't want to induce AC power into this, or it would blow these bulbs out. So what you do, you check your control, and we're in the red position, which means no power will be induced. So that's fine, we can go ahead and hook it up. Let's set it right there. And all you do, it's all color-coded, you just push the one little yellow outlet down, the other little yellow outlet down, and it's connected. That set's kind of crooked. Now this thing is a very bad flasher. We don't manufacture it, so I apologize for it. But let's see how it works now. When the eye unit is covered, it activates. And when it's uncovered, it deactivates. So here comes the train, passes over it, activates it, continues down the line and deactivates it. Back again. Okay, now supposing you wanted it to stay on longer than that, let's say for a period of time after the train passes, you simply adjust the timer up to the period of time you want, and now let's have the train pass by. When it passes, it activates it. But now it continues to stay activated. I really couldn't see the timer, so I don't know what length of time we set it for. I'm hoping only 10 or 15 seconds. This thing sure has a crazy flashing pattern. There it goes, it deactivated. Let's see that again. Train comes in from the other direction, activates it, passes it, and it remains activated until the timer is set. Now, how long can this timer go? It can go from 1 second to 2 minutes. There, it just went off now. So you have plenty of time. Now let's hook up another type of accessory. Let's take a accessory that needs power. Okay, we're just going to disconnect this. Okay. I'm touching the wires together and connecting it. Here's a signal. Now the signal will have to have power. It has no way to operate. So what we do, we change our switch to a mode of inducing power. And we hook the signal up in the appropriate receptacles. It explains all in the instruction book, like which is common. And again, it's all color-coded. It's so easy. And as you see, it's a real easy hookup. We've hooked this thing up in, what, about half a minute flat here. Okay, now what we have is a situation where we want the signal to stay red, but we want to turn it green when the train passes over. Now again, here comes the train, activates the green, and the green will stay activated because we still have the timer set. And after a period of time, it'll just change back to red again. Now let's watch it do that again. Changes the signal, and as it continues up the track, it will change back. Very, very easy to do. And once again, if you wanted to, you could have it set for instant on and instant off as soon as the train passed. It's up to you. Now, let's look at another interesting type of an accessory. This will be a whistle. And the whistle is interesting in the fact that it needs power to run, but it's a simple push-button contact to blow. How do we accomplish that with the eye control? Very, very simply. This is a very nice whistle. I like this. This comes from Art Machine Services, and they advertise in most of the major model railroad magazines if you're interested in acquiring one. All right, what we do, we put our control back in the red position, which means we do not want to induce power to the trigger, and we simply hook the trigger up to the two yellow outlets. And then to get power for this whistle, we have a courtesy outlet back here. So you simply hook the red to the red and the black to the black, and that whistle is powered up now, but it is not inducing power into the trigger mechanism. Now again, as soon as the eye is covered, it will blow. Now, the thing to remember when you're using your timer is as long as this eye is covered, that whistle will blow. So if this were a 6-car train, it would blow for the whole 6-car length. So let me move it very slow so you can see that. Now, in a normal situation, it would just go over and give a 2. Now we also have a model of this whistle. We buy the whistle from Art Machine Services and we modify it so that what happens is when the eye control is covered, it gives 2 short blasts and stops. We add some little circuitry to their board to do that, and that's what you've seen in many of the pictures, like when a train pulls out of the station or that, and it gives 2 little blasts and then it leaves. That's the way that was operating. It's the same whistle unit, but we modified it a little bit. I happen to have this one loose. This is a one we haven't modified yet. Now again, you could set the timer for this to operate as long as you wanted to. And there's an endless amount of things that you can hook up. Now, the question is, could you have hooked up all three of these items at once to the eye control? Have the whistle go, the crossing gate go, the signal go? Yes, you can. You've seen that happening in many of the other items on the videotape, like the station stops and things, so I'm not going to go through hooking that up again. But it's a totally versatile control. One control is only limited in the number of items that it can operate simply by the total wattage and amperage that's available. And you can operate a lot of accessories. We've experimented with Lionel and have operated up to about 16 accessories. I think we made 16 all off of one unit. Normally, I left this one uncoded so that you could see a little better what it looks like. Normally, when you get your eye control, it will be all covered in a heavy thing of a black rubber coating that we use, which makes them water resistant and waterproof. Indoors, there's the mounting screws. You just mount it under the board. Outdoors, it goes in a building or in one of our boxes. And as you can see, very simple to hook up, no tools required, no soldering. This was really made for people who are not into electronics, but just like to see their train operate. Look at some fun that we can have with an eye control. Here's a typical small town station stop, and we have an eye control unit inside which will make the train stop right at the station here, right about where the signal is. You'll have to bear with us, we don't have a whole train, just an engine, because we're in G scale and we only have a 3-foot long board, and if I put a passenger car in the back of this engine, it would take up the whole display. So we're just going to pretend the engine is the entire train. Now what we're asking the eye control to do is stop the train at the station for 15 seconds. The signal will be green as the train approaches, but will turn to red to indicate that the train should stop. When it's time for the train to go, the signal will turn to green again, indicating to the engineer that it's time to go. Now, when the engine crosses our road here, it will also turn on the flashing crossbucks, and I ask you to bear with this crossbuck. It doesn't flash real well until it's very well warmed up, and we don't really have the length of track here to do that. But you'll get the general idea. And we're also going to ask it to ring the crossing bell. Now normally you'd want to have these things more separated, probably the signal up the line a little bit and the crossbucks a little more down, but we're very confined with space here. Then we've put another interesting thing inside the station. We have put a continuous loop tape recorder, and we've recorded an announcement for this particular train. The station's on my garden railway where it will stop, and that will be activated by the eye control. And also we've put one of the Ott Machine Works whistles inside the station, and we're going to ask that to blow the whistle twice when the train leaves. And it does it all beautifully, all controlled by the eye control. So without further ado, let's turn it on and see it operate. Now the train will approach and it'll trip the eye. Papillon Valley Lines, train number 2, now departing for Duania, Cinnamon, Marta, and Mercedes. That was kind of fun. Now these stations, we can either sell you the equipment to put in a station to make it do this, or we can sell you the entire station. We sell the station in both G scale and O scale, and we sell it built up just about as you see it here, your choice of colors, your choice of station name, in every model that is made. For instance, you can choose any of the Pala station models, or in O scale, any of the Lionel station models. and we'll take care of everything else for you. Also, the announcement, you can either record the announcement yourself, or you can have us record it if you would like to have, you know, a different voice other than your own. Now I'm going to turn the camera off a minute and set the engine back on the track and everything, and we'll just see it one more time, just so you can see it operate once more. Here we go, we've got the engine back in place again. The module in the station that's hooked to the eye control can control up to 4 signals, up to 4 cross-block flashers, and up to 4 of the crossing gates, if you have the line-out type crossing gates that go up and down, as well as the tape recorder, and of course the stations come lighted. It stops the train, and also, although I don't prefer to do it that way, but Lionel did on some of their stations, the eye control can also make the station lights not come on until the train approaches the station, if you want to do, say you had an old Lionel station and you want to simulate that. Now let's watch this operate one more time. The train approaches. Papillon Valley Lines, train number 2, now departing for Duania, Cinnamon, Marta, and Mercedes. And of course you can control the volume like on the crossing bell and on the announcement and that to make it a little more scale and a little more realistic. I wanted to have it up high enough so that you could hear it on the videotape. Again, this is just some of the fun that you can have with the eye control and the various accessories that would go with it. And we have many worthy competitors out there on the market putting out electronic products. But we believe, at least up to this point, that eye control is the state of the art and can do just so many things that many of our competitors' things can't.